your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks so much for joining us for our final weekend cast before Christmas. Well, the Lethbridge West riding will remain orange. The NDP's Rob Miyashiro won with 53% of the vote during Wednesday night's by-election and will be heading to the Alberta legislature. He beat out John Middleton Hope of the UCP by 1,150 votes. In total, 13,561 votes were cast. The Alberta Party's Leighton Viverka finished a distant third with 233 votes. Lethbridge West has not had a representative in the legislature since the NDP's Shannon Phillips resigned last July. BCN's Hal Roberts chatted with Rob Miyashiro to talk about his big win.
Rob, how sweet does this win really feel for you?
Well, it's a relief for one, Hal. I mean, it was a long campaign. And, I said this when I got elected for city council as well, that it is truly an honor, right? If people have been in elected position before, it's an honor that the people of your community are choosing you to represent them in whatever way that may be. And it's humbling because you're being asked by your community to do things for the community as I've done throughout my life. So I'm super excited to get to Edmonton and represent Lethbridge West and the city.
Now, you ran against the UCP's Nathan Newdorf in the Lethbridge East riding last year and lost. So what lessons did you take from that election which perhaps helped you this time around?
You know, the biggest difference, Hal, I think, was the messaging. In a general election, it's often you have to look at the provincial messaging as an entire campaign. What was really, I think, key for us this time is we could focus on local messaging.
Soon to be sworn in as NDP MLA for Lethbridge West, Rob Miyashiro, thanks so much for your time today. And by the way, the official by-election results for the Lethbridge West riding will be released on December 28th by Elections Alberta.
The chief of Lethbridge Fire and EMS provided BCN with a year-end interview to recap the service and what they're looking forward to in 2025. Chief Greg Adair said in 2024, their call volumes for EMS have stabilized and even decreased.
2024 has been another exciting year for Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services. Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services, from a call volume perspective, we have seen a stabilization of fire calls that we respond to within our community. Our fire services continues to be busy in 2024. Our EMS call volume has stabilized and in fact decreased a little bit this year. However, the acuity of calls that we are responding to continue to be quite serious. Fortunately, this year, the number of serious fires we've had in 2024 has decreased from 2023. In 2025, we will be focusing on more public education events and prevention so that we can help ensure that there are less fires in 2025 than 2024.
Chief Adair says other goals for his department in 2025 include increasing dispatch to the Blood Tribe Fire Department, introducing a new tactical EMS team in conjunction with Lethbridge Police, and the relocation of Fire Station Number 3. And Lethbridge Police Chief Shaheen Madizadeh also held a year-end interview with BCN on Thursday. Residents have voiced their concerns on various topics, including downtown policing and drug crime. Chief Madizadeh notes that progress has been made in tackling crime in our city and says 2024 has been one of the most productive years he's had as chief here in our city.
In 2024, we knew that we still have to do something based on the surveys we had done and what the citizens had asked us to do. And our plan was to actually, even though we don't have a full complement of downtown policing, we wanted to bring people from different units together to aggressively target crime and criminals in the downtown zone. So for 2025, we are looking at bringing our downtown policing unit to 7 officers. Based on what we've seen so far until the end of July, that we have the true stats, we've seen significant decrease in crime and CSI in the city.
Chief Medizadeh says he's excited that the LPS is recruiting more members, including the 13 cadets who graduated Friday at the Polytechnic. He also says he is proud of the results from their community survey that showed public perception of the LPS is a lot more positive. We need to take a short break, but when we return, a shakeup in Ottawa this week and now a possible non-confidence vote in the new year as Jagmeet Singh sings a new tune. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It's been a doozy of a week in federal politics. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh now says his party will table a non-confidence motion to bring the Liberal government down. In a post on X, Singh says the New Democrats will bring forward the motion in the next sitting of the House of Commons. The House won't return until January 27th after they rose for Christmas break on a Tuesday. Singh's comments came about an hour before Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was set to shuffle his cabinet. And speaking of Trudeau, it's been a turbulent week for the Prime Minister and his Liberal Party. First, a political bombshell was dropped on Ottawa Monday when Chrystia Freeland announced she was leaving cabinet as Finance Minister. She made the surprise declaration ahead of a scheduled cabinet meeting where she was set to deliver the fall economic statement. There are reports that Trudeau wanted Freeland to leave finance and accept a different portfolio, which she declined. This was followed by pressure within his own caucus calling for him to resign. Then Canada's Housing Minister Sean Fraser of Nova Scotia announced he will not be seeking re-election, making him the 9th minister this year to announce they'll be stepping down from cabinet. Then on Friday, Trudeau made a shuffle to his cabinet. The PM's shuffle comes a month ahead of the inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump. That gives new ministers just a few short weeks to learn their new departments inside and out. According to the Canadian Press, Montreal MP Rachel Bendayan, Winnipeg MP Terry Dugard, Toronto MP Nate Esgreen-Smith, Ottawa MP David McGuinty, and Nova Scotia MP Darren Fisher will all be named to cabinet. Following Freeland's resignation last Monday, Canada's Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc, who's been a longtime friend of Trudeau, was sworn in as Canada's new Finance Minister.
I look forward to working with Canada's premiers as I have for the last number of years on some important challenges facing the country. I'm also thinking tonight of the remarkable women and men who work in the public safety portfolio, in the department and in the agencies. I've been inspired by their work over the last year and a half, and I look forward to hopefully continuing to support them in the work that they do for Canadians.
LeBlanc will also remain on as Canada's Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. And by the way, the fall economic statement revealed Canada's deficit inflated from $40 billion to almost $62 billion. That includes $1.3 billion over the next 6 years to beef up Canada's border security. Now, Canada's premiers met in Toronto this past week to discuss cross-border trade on the heels of a 25% tariff threat from U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who is hosting the First Minister's meeting, says it's time to push back on Trump. Sun political columnist Brian Lilley says many premiers are in agreement with Ford.
I think that the premiers are stepping up because the prime minister is not. I mean, you look across the country, you've got Francois Legault in Quebec saying he's sending their provincial police force down to the border. You've got Wab Kinew, the new Democrat premier in Manitoba, saying he's sending conservation officers down. Danielle Smith has one of the most detailed plans on dealing with the border with 51 sheriffs and a 2-kilometer no-go zone. And then Doug Ford, he obviously has a different take than Smith. Smith says she doesn't want to bring in anything that would stop oil and gas flowing south. But Ford says he will stop electricity. There's obviously very different considerations when it comes to the economy. But these premiers are stepping up where Trudeau is absent. And they're saying, all right, we'll work with you on the border, Mr. Trump. But in the case of Doug Ford, he's saying, we'll work with you on the border, but if you hit us, I'll hit you back hard.
The 55,000 picketing employees of Canada Post put down their picket signs and picked up their mail bags after the Canada Industrial Relations Board ordered them back to work last Tuesday under their existing contract, which has now been extended until May 15th. Labour Minister Stephen McKinnon said he would appoint an industrial inquiry commission to investigate the bargaining issues and come up with recommendations on how a new potential agreement can be reached. Meanwhile, analysts say Canada Post's nearly month-long strike may have finally driven some customers away for good, leaving the Crown Corporation in even worse shape than before. Workers returned to their jobs Tuesday following the parcel stoppage that forced thousands of businesses and individuals to use private carriers to deliver packages. While some businesses and organizations might come back to the Postal Service, others that had yet to make the switch to digital messaging could now opt for online-only invoicing and communication, removing even more revenue from the Canada Post. The Canadian Mint announced Canadian legend Terry Fox will be on the new $5 bill. The athlete and activist who ran the Marathon of Hope in the early 1980s helped to raise close to $25 million towards cancer care and research before he passed away. Port Coquitlam Mayor Brad West expressed his immense pride in their hometown hero being honored in this way. Terry Fox will replace Sir Wilfrid Laurier on the next version of the $5, and he will then be moved to the next version of the $50 bill. The federal government says it's pushing its target to achieve a net zero electricity grid back 15 years to the year 2050. Officials say it's part of the new clean electricity regulations announced this week. Ottawa previously said it wanted to decarbonize all electricity grids by 2035, but received a lot of pushback from both Alberta and Saskatchewan that it was not doable. Premier Danielle Smith has said that Alberta would mount a legal challenge, saying the regulations wade into provincial jurisdiction. She said that is a case Alberta fully expects to win. It turns out the GST tax holiday is becoming a real pain for several small businesses across Canada. The federal government is pausing the levy on a number of items, including prepared foods and toys, until mid-February. Beverly Rasmussen is a small business expert from Langley, BC, who has worked with more than 700 small business owners. She says this GST break is becoming a real fiasco for many.
No one asked small business owners whether this was a good idea or not. You know, I'll give you a direct quote from a client of mine. I can't wait to spend December 12, 13, and 14 manually reviewing every SKU I have to temporarily adjust the tax status, only to be able to do it again on Valentine's Day. What a nightmare. So here we're at the busiest time of year, Christmas, and you know, when their staff are maxed, and now then they're going to have to do it again in New Year. Plus, it covers over 2 tax years for most business owners. So if you consider the cost of accounting, dealing with a tax issue this year and next year, it's money, time, productivity. Yeah, it is definitely a nightmare, as the client says.
The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is holding Alberta government officials' feet to the fire since the province promised to reduce the income tax bracket from 10% to 8% in the new year. The UCP said this provincial income tax would save families around $1,500 each. Chris Sims, the Alberta director for the CTF, says that families need that kind of relief right now.
A lot of folks in Alberta are doing better compared to other places in Canada, but as you know, we still have record lineups for places like food banks and record demand from working families. That's a nice way of saying that a parent who's holding down a job is still counting on donated jars of peanut butter to feed their kids. So that's a serious concern here in Alberta. We've also got fuel costs. Winter is here. We've got home heating costs. A lot of folks are finding it really unaffordable. And so this is why we are urging the Alberta government to keep its promise in the new year and cut that income tax rate.
'Tis the season to be more giving, but according to some alarming stats, charitable giving is on the decline in Canada and has been for years. In fact, on average, our American neighbors are much more neighborly than Canadians when it comes to donating money to charities. To shed more light on this, I spoke with Grady Monroe, who is a policy analyst at Fraser Institute and the co-author of the study Generosity in Canada, the 2024 Generosity Index. Take a look. Grady, give us the latest stats. So are Canadians more or less generous than in previous years?
So what we found is that generosity in Canada has been declining for many years now. And how we measure that is we look at two metrics. We look at the share of Canadian tax filers who are donating to charity, and we look at the share of total income that is donated. And what we find is that in 2022, which is the latest year of data, both of those metrics hit 20-year lows. We saw that only 17.1% of Canadian tax filers donated to charity, and only 0.5% of total income was donated.
So what is the actual percentage of total income that was donated in 2022? Like, do you have numbers for how much average people are actually donating compared to Canada's all-time highest percentage of total income?
Yeah, so as mentioned, the share of total income in 2022 that was donated was 0.5%. And in the last 20 years, the highest level we've seen was in 2006, and that saw Canadians donating 0.72% of their total income. So we have seen a considerable drop since then.
Okay, do we know why?
It's a good question. We've seen this decline occurring for some time now, and while unfortunately in this study we don't look at the specific reasons or factors that are causing this decline, but we can highlight certain things that are likely coming into effect. We know that research says people's level of after-tax income, their religious affiliation, age of the population, level of education, all of those are factors that help determine the level of generosity in a jurisdiction. But we can't say specifically which of those factors is causing this decline.
Okay, so which province had the highest percentage of tax filers that donated to charity, and then on the flip side, which had the lowest?
Yeah, so in 2022, we saw that Manitoba, it had the highest percentage of tax filers donating to charity at 19.3%. And on the other end, we saw New Brunswick had the lowest share of tax filers donating at 14.7%.
So which province donated the highest percentage of its aggregate income to charity? And then on the flip side, which one donated the least?
Yeah, so similar to the other metric, we see Manitoba at the top end. In 2022, Manitobans donated 0.71% of their total income to charity, which was the highest of any province in Canada. And on the lower end, we saw that Quebec donated the least share of total income at just 0.26%.
And speaking of charitable giving, the Salvation Army is doing its last push before Christmas. They're in the final days of their Toys for Tots campaign. You might also be accustomed to hearing the sounds of their ringing bells to draw attention to their kettle campaign. I spoke with Lieutenant Zachary Marshall of the Lethbridge Salvation Army to find out how many families are in need this season.
The demand for our services, especially at Christmas time, is on the rise. And I think that's true of all of the helping agencies in Lethbridge. It is an unfortunate side effect of the inflation and how things are going. And we're really just seeing families who are struggling. We're seeing families who have never had to reach out for help before. Reach out for help this Christmas time. And, people are faced with the impossible choice Do I pay for rent or do I pay for Christmas? And we're really kind of seeing all sides of it. And it's heartbreaking. It's devastating. We're happy to help, but it is unfortunate that there is such a demand for our help.
Yeah. And of course, we were talking about how this is a crazy time of year. So every year, the Salvation Army does the annual Toys for Tots outreach at Christmas time. So tell us what that's all about and how we can get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. We are big believers in the magic of Christmas. And I personally hold true to the fact that I think every child deserves to open a gift on Christmas morning. And that's kind of where our Toys for Tots campaign comes in. We're one of a few agencies in Lethbridge that provide toy assistance. And our Toys for Tots campaign this year, we will see 500 children and parents come through the doors to shop for their kids, and hopefully we can provide some toys. So we do have some drop-off locations throughout Lethbridge at locations like Toys R Us, Center Village Mall, and the Toy Mountain Drive that they're doing there, and other places in Lethbridge. So we're really ramping up because the time is coming near in the next couple of weeks where we're going to be busy being elves in Santa's workshop is how we kind of refer to it. And it just is really special for us to be a part of that.
Right. And this is where parents can go and actually shop for their kids. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do people apply for that?
Yeah, so we have an online application on our website. So lethbridgesalvationarmy.ca/register. That's the link to our application, and we still do have room. So now's the time to apply if you're thinking about it.
And then, of course, speaking of this time of year, I believe that your annual Kettle Campaign fundraiser is underway now. So what's the fundraising goal and where do the funds get distributed?
Yeah, so this year we have a big goal of $220,000, and that money goes directly to support the work that we do in our community at Christmas time with our Toys for Tots campaign and our food assistance, but really throughout the year with some of the programs that we're able to offer. So the need is increasing, and we're really banking on the generosity of the people of Lethbridge to help us meet that $220,000 goal.
Mm-hmm. Has the TAP payment really helped increase donations for the Kettle Campaign?
It certainly has. I mean, nobody, or not a whole lot of people carry cash anymore. I can't say nobody, but the TAP donations account for about 15% of all of the donations come in. So that, so it is a help. Absolutely. It just gives one other option for people who are passing by our kettle to stop and make a donation.
Yeah, and you were saying donations are down 50%, and that's shocking to me. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's the economy, or is it the postal strike, like we were saying?
I think it's a variety of reasons. I don't think the postal strike has necessarily helped the case, but when we're thinking of inflation, the demand for our services are certainly on the rise. But the flip side of that is things are so much more expensive for everybody. I think we're all feeling a pinch this year. And so not everyone is able to help in the ways that they have before.
Well, every holiday season, there are a lot of parties going on, and chances are alcohol may be involved, which can lead to poor decisions like driving while impaired. We hear stories of that far too often, but what we don't hear often enough is how driving while intoxicated can ruin the lives of so many people. Elizabeth Esfeld, the chapter secretary for the Lethbridge and Area Chapter for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, shares a personal experience when her life was impacted by a drunk driver. Here she is now with BCN's Naveen Day.
A few years ago, I tried to stop an impaired driver from getting behind the wheel. She put the car in reverse and knocked me down, causing some serious injuries.
Wow.
Yeah, and I thankfully have recovered from some of the injuries, not all. But the trauma of that day will live on in my mind for the rest of my life.
Let's talk more about that trauma, like because this is something that you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. Let's hear more about that.
Going through this court system and the court process is extremely overwhelming, confusing, and scary. And without Mad Lethbridge and Area, it would have been 10 times worse. And The support is ongoing, even though my court cases are all done, and I have met such wonderful people, and that they have different stories other than mine, but we all share a strong bond.
Do you have any stats that you can share with us? Like how many people are killed or injured in Canada annually from impaired drivers?
Every year, hundreds are killed and thousands are injured every year. An alarming stat, every hour in Canada, an average of 9 federal criminal charges and provincial short-term license suspensions are laid for alcohol or drug impaired driving.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
Absolutely. And surveys also reveal that young males continue to have higher than average rates of driving after consuming alcohol, cannabis, or other drugs. What is it about the male lifestyle that causes this, and what needs to happen to change this?
Again, this comes back to education. By continuing to share our stories, not only in schools, but to the public, we hopefully will save a life. And today we have so many options for a safe ride home, from taxis, designated drivers, Ubers, or stay where you are if possible. Before heading out, make a plan. Set a few dollars aside for a taxi. Organize a time your designated driver to pick you up. Call a family member. No matter what, never make the wrong choice and get behind the wheel.
Do Canadians still have some misperceptions about the seriousness of driving after consuming alcohol or marijuana?
Definitely. Some people don't actually ever think it will happen to them. Being pulled over by the police and charged with impaired driving is happening. But it would be so much worse if you choose to drive while impaired and cause a crash that may kill you or someone else.
And there's also technology now where devices are readily available to self-test your own blood alcohol level. I've seen them in Costco, I've seen them online on Amazon and even Temu. Any thoughts on whether this is advisable and helpful or not?
If you need to rely on a device to self-test your ability to drive, should you maybe think again and call a cab? You are putting your life and others at risk. You may not have had too much to consume. Do not depend on a device. Depend on yourself to make a better decision, and do not drive.
Many cities across Canada are having issues with homelessness. Sadly, many who are battling addiction are living on the streets. Well, there is a Christian nonprofit group in Lethbridge that is doing its part to not only help feed, clothe, and house those that are most vulnerable, but also share the good news of God's saving grace. Catch our interview with Ken Kissick from Streets Alive Mission coming up next. And if you're watching us online, that full interview is available on our YouTube channel.